So it's all an illusion. This money is not equivalent to anything physical. It's a shared hallucination that society allows to continue. Everyone feels, good about the wealth in society, but the goods available to everyone totals a small fraction of the wealth that people have on paper in their bank accounts.
The Rational View is a weekly series hosted by me, Dr. Alan Scott, providing a rational, evidence-based perspective on important societal issues.
Produced by Soapbox Media.
The world needs evidence-based public policy now more than ever. Making the right decisions should not be partisan politics. Please help spread The Rational View by going to patron.podbean.com/The Rational View. Together, we can make a better future.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Rational View. I'm your host, Dr. Al Scott. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about finance. Now, as a scientist, I understand you may not want to hear me talking about finance, but it's a learning experience for me, and I'd like to share with you what I've learned. Not as an expert, but as someone who is deeply concerned with where our society is going and where we've ended up, and the sources of inequality and unrest in our society, which seem to be contributing to polarization and worse outcomes for society as a whole. I feel the need to speak up. So if you enjoy what you're hearing, please press like on your podcast app. I'd love to hear from you on my Facebook group, and come check me out on YouTube. I'm going to apologize in advance for my deep FM radio voice today. I've got a bit of a cold, but if you can get by that, let's explore a little bit about inequality. Inequality has never been higher in modern memory. Fiat currencies are those currencies that are not linked to real dollars, to real objects like gold-backed currencies. Fiat currencies are basically just paper that floats at the whim of the market, and they're controlled by financial elites and central bankers who are manipulating money and markets to subjugate the world. When the dollar was linked to physical stuff, it was more difficult to just print more of it and give it to your rich buddies. Gross domestic product has gone up since the 70s, while wages have stagnated. And I've discussed this in the past. But why? Why is that? One reason is that GDP in the West isn't linked to real stuff anymore. It's not linked to productive work of the people. The financial industry is printing money, printing fake money and calling it production. They're drinking a toast to pulling the wool over our eyes while civilization burns. More and more people are shuffling paper rather than building society. But who has the means to call bullshit on the global financial system, the backbone of U.S. global commerce, the goose that lays the golden eggs? And should we? Maybe it's good if we all just close our eyes and continue sleepwalking and pretend that we're all rich. Compared to some. So to try to understand this, I tried to put together a simplified model in an Excel spreadsheet of an economy. And I learned a bit. It reinforced, what I have learned in the past. And, maybe if I share it with you, you will also learn something from this. So, if you're a financial expert, you probably don't need to listen to this, and you'll probably find a lot of areas to poke holes in. And I would love to hear from you on Facebook if you can debunk some of these things or correct me where I've made an error. So here's my simple model. Let's say we have two workers, a lumberjack and a builder. The lumberjack cuts enough wood for one house in a year, and we're going to value that at $10,000 of work. So he does $10,000 of wood cutting. A builder also works for a year, does $10,000 of work building a house from the lumber. He takes the lumber from the woodcutter, builds a house. So the house contains $20,000 worth of labor. And it could be purchased by the lumberjack and the builder to live in at the end of the year with their $20,000 of equity. And this society would have a gross domestic product of $20,000. Okay, so the straightforward, simple exchange economy. So now let's say the builder and the lumberjack want to have a government to defend their land and build infrastructure. They decide to fund this government. So they decide to each pay 50% of their income in taxes to hire a third person to defend them. So now they only have $5,000 each of equity. They can't afford the house at the end of the year. They need 2 years now to pay for their home. But now the government has $10,000 in taxes, so they can hire a soldier at $10,000 a year to defend the houses. It all holds together. Now, the people always also realize they need someone to build roads and dig ditches. So they commit to a sales tax of 13% on all their transactions. So this raises the price of the $10,000 of lumber and raises the price on the home. And now you have the government is now taking almost $20,000 a year in taxes and can hire someone to build roads and ditches. But now the ditch digger and the soldier, they also pay income taxes of $5,000. So the government can actually hire a third employee from their taxes to count the taxes. And now the government is paying out $30,000 a year in wages and making $30,000 a year in taxes. So they're breaking even. There's no deficit. This is good. And now the lumberjack and the builder are in debt to pay for their house. It's looking like 3 years before they can pay it off with the sales taxes added on. But now they're supporting 3 government workers, one of which is just shuffling paper. The businesses now have a total revenue of something like $36,000, and the government is doing another $30,000 worth of useful labor. So the government realizes that with a 50% income tax rate, it's actually paying only half the salary of each employee in reality, because they're getting half of it back. So they can run a deficit, maybe hire a fourth worker at $10,000 a year, but they pay $5,000 in taxes. So it only adds a deficit of $5,000 a year to the government operations. And now there's $5,000 more cash in the economy. So we see a pattern. Whenever there's a government deficit or a loan generated, this adds the same amount of money to the economy that didn't exist before. Where did this money come from? Did the bank or the government have that money to begin with? No. They didn't start with any money. As long as everyone in the community keeps most of their money in their bank accounts, we only need a small fraction of real money to go around and do the transactions. The rest of the money is fictitious on paper. You only need a small fraction of the total value of goods to be liquid to stimulate the economy. So you can see the startings of a financial model of understanding how things work. So making loans, taking out loans creates money in the system. And as long as not everybody needs to use their money at once, you can have more money in the system than there's actually stuff. So people feel wealthier than they really are. And as long as nobody makes a run on the banks, everybody's happy. But now let's drop these people into a capitalist system where they work for an owner who extracts a profit. The theory behind capitalism is that the entrepreneurs are contributing capital to set up the businesses and share the risk and rewards of a larger venture that the poor workers could not afford to fund themselves. So these people are putting skin into the game, taking a risk, and getting paid back for their risk. So lumberjack and builder are each getting paid $10,000. The lumber CEO marks up the lumber by 80% to make at the end of the day, a $6,000 profit this year. The builder CEO buys $18,000 worth of lumber, and the builder adds $10,000 to the value of it, but the CEO marks this whole thing up by 80% to now $50,000 for the price of the house to make his own $16,000 profit. So now the house is worth $50,000, not the original $20,000. And the government gets to keep more taxes due to the markup on the price of goods. They can hire another person. Now we have 9 people, each making an average of $10,000 from the initial $20,000 worth of labor. Of course, some of the government productivity is actually also producing real goods, but not a lot of it. There's the soldier, there's the tax counter, there's the ditch digger and an infrastructure builder who's doing real good work. But then there's 2 more that were added into middle management that are just shuffling paper. GDP of this town is now booming. They've ballooned to something like $68,000 worth of commerce, $50,000 of government spending. But now the lumberjack and the builder are further in debt. Now they need to take out a loan for $50,000 to buy their house. They move into the house together, but they have to work for at least 7 years now to pay for it instead of 2. And over that same 7-year period, the builder CEO and the lumber CEO are still taking out profits out of the businesses that the builder and the lumberjack are making happen. And if they continue to sell houses every year, they're going to clear over that 7-year period about $140,000, and they can buy their own individual homes and yachts with no loans at all. That doesn't seem 100% fair. And now the bankers realize that they can require interest from the workers to make a living themselves, so they can charge 5% on the loans, on the huge loans that these people are taking out, and the lumberjack and builder need to set aside more cash to pay the interest. They could take out a 20-year mortgage with 5% interest. In the first year, they're going to pay $5,000 to the bank, and the mortgage principal will decrease by $2,000 from $50,000 to $48,000. After tax, they still have about $5,000 of cash left over for food and entertainment. And after 1 year, there's this $54,000 worth of cash now in the system, in this economy. There's $3,700 each in the 2 workers after they've paid their interest and their mortgage and their property tax or their income taxes. The CEOs each have a total of $21,000. The government employees have $25,000 in their pocket after income tax, and the banker has another $5,000. So the financial elites feel useful and valuable just by shuffling paper. They've created much more wealth than the 2 workers. This $55,000 worth of cash in the financial system is basically the amount of the mortgage plus the $5,000 government deficit. So it's all an illusion. This money is not equivalent to anything physical. It's a shared hallucination that society allows to continue. Everyone feels, good about the wealth in society, but the goods available to everyone totals a small fraction of the wealth that people have on paper in their bank accounts. And then over the next 20 years, the builder and the lumberjack are going to slave away to pay back the money they owe to the bank out of their real productivity. They've given half their money to the government to get the services of all these federal employees who are paid the same as them. And over this period, they're going to end up paying far more than what the house is worth to the bank due to the profits and interest taken by the CEOs and the bankers. Remember, the house is only worth $20,000 in real labor. But they had to promise to pay $50,000 because the owners of the businesses took $21,000 and the sales taxes inflated the price by another $9,000. So that's kind of where we are today. That's our system that we've bought into. Is it fair? Is it equitable? Is it ethical? Is there a better way? The 2 workers are now supporting a complex ecosystem of government workers and paper shufflers, CEOs, tax collectors. In terms of addressing Maslow's pyramid of needs, the CEOs and the bankers aren't doing anything. They're just gambling with paper. Should the owners get to hoard the profits given to them by the workers, or should they be shared equitably with the employees? Could the employees have worked together to form a company without the CEOs? I would argue that that's becoming more and more of a reality today, thanks to the advent of artificial intelligence. I think that the sort of things that professional CEOs do is well within the range of emerging AI technology. And in fact, we don't need to take these risks to pay obscene amounts to rare CEOs that have all of the human foibles and could potentially make mistakes. I would argue that technology exists today to use something like a collective AI system, like what I discussed in my interview with David Kelly on his emotional artificial intelligence called Uplift, if you recall. We could address this issue. I mean, the issue is one of corporate governance. Now, the Harvard Business Review actually ran an experiment to see how well AI systems could perform as CEOs. And this was not too long ago, but AIs are advancing very quickly right now. This study showed that AIs consistently outperformed human CEOs by maximizing growth while minimizing risks for their companies. But the AIs struggled to adapt to rare, unpredictable events such as global pandemics, for example, often focused too much on short-term success, the global optimizer problem. But these faults were very similar to the ones that humans make all the time. But in the study, it just seemed that the AIs failed more quickly under these black swan type events. AI excels at working with data, drawing inferences, predicting success, but perhaps it lacks the empathy and alignment to take on the intangible leadership skills, such as team building and mentoring. Daniel Tsai, a teacher at Toronto Metropolitan University who specializes in artificial intelligence and business, said, AI doesn't have all those complexities of emotion that make leaders great. Lateral thinking, creativity, the desire and impulse for innovation, entrepreneurship, those human traits are rather difficult to replicate, at least at this point in time in history, in artificial intelligence. But as I said, AI is moving quickly. And, Uplift and this system for mediated artificial superintelligence, or MASI, as David Kelly calls it, can actually adapt to people's emotions rather well. In fact, so can other AIs. So the idea here is that we can augment leadership with collective emotional superintelligence using a mediated group intelligence sort of Borg scenario, where all of the participants can, the AI is set to govern the company. It brings up thoughts, sends it around to the company. The people put in their thoughts, weigh the pluses and minuses, the emotional attributes of the decisions, and then the AI brings this all together, and it becomes like a collective intelligence, such that the sum of the parts is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And a MASI would have other advantages as well. They're scalable, available 24/7, aligned with the ethics of the people contributing to it. The emotional alignment also mitigates the known failures of the emotionless optimization engines that most people are associate with AI. And this I think this really mitigates the biggest failure of democratic corporate governance. In the cutthroat world of capitalism, democratic processes have been mostly sidelined in favor of hierarchical, monarchic, or tyrannical governance structures where, we have a single dude at the top, or mostly dudes, sometimes women, but mostly dudes, directing the company. And, one can point to the drawbacks of rule by committee as a reason why the tyranny works better. Democratic processes result in decision paralysis, where everybody has their own pet group, their own pet project, and nobody is able to effectively make difficult decisions. However, there's also the risk of high-profile executives making subjective decisions due to non-optimized incentive structures. I know a lot of these people are just trying to game the system and, make their numbers for the end of the quarter to get their stock option bonuses. This is a threat to organizational morale and performance. I think the ability to share profits amongst the workers, rather than being pressured into earmarking obscene amounts for star performing CEOs, would have obvious benefits in terms of turnover rates and employee engagement. So I think, when looking at the problems of corporate government, I think we're in the position where we can move to a democratic structure and make use of artificial intelligence systems to bring back the power to the workers in a way that does not affect competitiveness, does not affect innovation, does not negatively affect innovation. In fact, the improved employee engagement of having an ethical decision-making system at the heart of your company rather than an arbitrary incentive structure potentially perverted by errors in the optimization algorithm, I think the advantages to such a system would be obvious. How to get there from here is another question. And, the way things are in politics these days, I don't have a lot of hope for a quick turnover. But I think, what we do need, what could happen is that when companies start moving over to these systems and start outperforming their competitors and start winning in the system as it is now, I think that sets the stage for more equitable sharing of profits. As you remember that in the model of capitalism that I put there, the CEOs are pulling out profits every year while the workers' take-home pay is going down. And this doesn't add anything to the productivity. It doesn't help the economy. So, I know I'm going to be yelled at by all of the right-wing neoliberals who believe that the greed is the best way, that allowing ourselves to give in to our negative impulses helps improve the situation and makes for the best country possible, the best society possible. I don't agree. I don't think that can be shown. I don't think, if you look at any sort of measure of well-being, you're not going to find libertarianism or unregulated economies and well-being running hand in hand by any stretch. But why did I do all this work? One of the reasons that I put together this model is that I was looking for the sources of decoupling between gross domestic product and wages after 1970. And one of the reasons that is often cited is the decoupling of the dollar from the gold standard. Nixon did this around 1970. The US dollar was no longer linked to the gold standard. The US dollar became what you would call a fiat currency. And this is something that allowed then GDP and wages to become decoupled, and productivity and GDP became decoupled, because now financial games, paper shuffling, basically could make new wealth. And GDP reflects paper shuffling as much as it does productivity. So maybe, real GDP hasn't grown as far as we think. We've outsourced productivity to other countries, offshoring labor. Maybe we aren't producing much value anymore now that we're, more dependent on financial markets and trading and monetization. And this brings up a worrying question. In this case, billionaires who hoard most of the world's wealth might be needed to keep the system afloat. If all of that money were circulating in the economy, it would probably cause significant inflation. Now, if you look at graphs of money supply versus GDP, it's already way out of whack. The amount of money in the system has significantly outpaced GDP in recent years, thanks to quantitative easing and, huge deficit spending from federal governments. So quantitative easing is when the central bank gives free money to smaller banks to create money in the system, to liquefy assets, effectively allow money to circulate and cause economic growth. So this leaves us with a very uncomfortable situation. That much of today's wealth is built on these fantasy market games that we've played, and as long as the majority of people decide to play along, these games will continue. It's when enough people decide to say no that we have a possibility for resetting. And I don't have a directive for you here, but I just want to tell you the reality of the game that we're playing right now, and be aware of it, and talk to your representatives and understand that you're being played. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this little discussion, and I look forward to hearing your insights and feedback on this. Thank you for listening to The Rational View. I appreciate you. You help me to keep going. Your feedback is what powers me to keep wanting to do this work and help discuss how we can improve society together. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
If you'd like to follow up with more in-depth discussions, please come find us on Facebook at The Rational View and join our discussion group. If you like what you're hearing, please consider visiting my Patreon page at patron.podbean.com/therationalview. Thanks for listening.